Hi everyone, and thanks for joining the session today. In this session, I'll talk a little bit about a self-report tool that was developed by myself and my CSU colleague, Lysa Dealtry, that was focused specifically on finding out about children's experiences with hearing and listening in a preschool setting. So in this session, we'll talk more about how we went about developing this tool, what elements we included in the tool, and how we actually implemented it. And you might have noticed that the title of the session is a little bit ironic, considering that this is a conference about early childhood voices. So "My mouth is zipped" is a direct quote from a 4-year-old involved in the study, telling us about what it's like to listen at preschool. So I'll give you a bit of information, about a bit of background information. When we set about starting the study, we're really interested in hearing children's firsthand experiences of what it was like for them to hear and listen in the preschool setting. But what we found was that there's very few studies that actually use self-reports with children under the age of 6. And we didn't find any self-reports of hearing and listening in particular for children that young. So we set about to develop one. And this was really important because we noticed from studies of older children who were reporting on their own experiences of, could be a variety of things. Those reports did not always match up with adult reports of what they thought the child was experiencing. So we wanted to hear that firsthand account from children. It was a challenge. The challenge for us was, how do we best capture the perspectives and experiences of children under the age of 5 years? And we'll talk in the next few slides a little bit about how we did that. So again, our aim was to develop and implement a holistic self-report tool to enable children's active participation in research, focused on their experiences of hearing and listening in the preschool setting. And the image that I've got on the screen there is the front cover of the self-report tool. And you'll notice that it does include a couple of photos from the children's own preschool setting to give them a bit of context. And the introduction that the educators read to them, because the educators did collect the data from the children. It says, "We would like you to tell us and draw some pictures about listening in your classroom. Your teachers at preschool can help you do this. You can tell us what you think in this book. It's just for you." So a bit more about the method that we used. The self-report tool was developed using a participatory rights framework with design features including emoji-based rating scales of how well children could hear in particular classroom situations. It also included drawings about what it was like for them to listen at preschool. And then the drawings were accompanied by narrations from the children. And the tool was completed by 69 children aged 3 to 5 years in a preschool classroom. And in this session, I'll show you some examples from 2 children as case examples. So children completed the self-report tool during the normal preschool day, and we left this to the discretion of the early childhood educators. We didn't want to interrupt the children's day as much as possible, so the educators decided when it was appropriate to administer the booklet. So it included 8 questions, and it was accompanied by photos of the classroom setting, asking children about how easy or hard it was for them to hear in different classroom situations. Examples of questions included, when you're listening to a story on the mat, how difficult or easy is it for you to hear? Or when one of your friends is telling their news, and also when you're sitting at the back of the mat. And I'll show you some examples of that in just a minute. And again, children were asked to draw and tell what it was like to listen at preschool. And educators did sometimes scaffold the children to complete the tool, and they recorded the children's narrations. And before I show you some of those examples, I just wanted to point out that we're very focused on getting children's initial assent to participate in the study, and also to check in with them to get ongoing assent. So in the first image here, you can see it's our initial assent page. And we say, your parents were asked if it's okay for us to talk to you about listening in your classroom. They've signed a letter to say that it's okay. If you're okay with it too, you can write your name here, or you can draw a picture of yourself here. And some children wrote their names, some drew pictures, and some did both. And I believe that all of the children that were asked did assent initially to participate in the study. And then the second image shows an example of ongoing assent and how we captured that. So it says, we're interested in learning about what you think and how you feel about listening at preschool. To learn from you about listening at preschool, I'd like you to look at some pictures and draw a picture about what you think about listening at preschool. We can do this in the booklet, and when you're finished, we'll give it to the researchers that you met to look at it. So initially, Lysa, my co-researcher, and I had gone into the classroom and talked with the children about the research and allowed them to meet us. We met them and we allowed them to ask any questions that they had. So we give them a few options. You can circle the face that tells me how you feel about doing this today, either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. If you circled no, could we ask you again later? And if you don't feel like talking or drawing after a while, you can stop at any time. It's okay. And this next image shows you just a sample page of the self-report tool. So this gives some different situations in the classroom, and then we ask them, is it mostly easy to hear, sometimes hard to hear, or mostly hard to hear? And the feedback we got from the educators when they administered this tool with the children is that the majority of the children did seem to understand what was being asked of them. So the situations here are, when you're listening to a story on the mat, how easy or hard is it for you to hear? When you're listening to a story on the mat and other children are talking, when you're on the mat and the teacher is asking questions. And again, there were 8 situations that we asked them about. Okay, and this is just one example. We also asked them to draw a picture and tell us about listening at preschool. And again, with ongoing assent, we asked them, would you like to do this? Yes, yes, but not sure, or no. And this child, you can see the drawing there, and the narration at the bottom says, that's the ears to listen, and that's my lips to zip, so I can listen. And we also asked them to circle the face that tells us how the child feels about giving the drawing to the researchers, or if they wanted to keep the drawing. And if they wanted to keep the drawing, we just took a photo. Okay, these next 2 images are more examples of the drawings and the narrations about children's experiences of listening. So this first one, you can see the drawing, and the narration says, it's me sitting at the mat at preschool. I can't hear because my ears are blocked. I've got medicine. So that's one example of a child telling us directly that they are having some hearing difficulties. The next example, you can see the quite elaborate drawing there. And the description is, it's a person with lots and lots of ears. Now, what we found from this administering this self-report tool is that children aged 3 to 5 were able to effectively report on their own experiences of hearing and listening using the self-report tool. It was evident that the multiple opportunities for communicating about experiences of hearing and listening were key features that made it an effective tool. So that includes the rating scales, the drawings, and the narrations. And we think that the children's drawings have the potential to provide a more holistic picture of children's experiences and to cast further light on or validate what's reported in the rating scales. So we think that it's really effective to have all these different opportunities for children to tell us what their experiences are. So to conclude, we think that the self-report tool reflected the importance of gaining children's perspectives in educational matters that concern them, especially for those under the age of 6. And in one of our previous published reports using this data, we did find that children were, a significant group of children were reporting difficulties with being able to hear in the classroom setting, but that those children were not being identified by the educators as having difficulties hearing. So there was a significant percentage of children that were having difficulties, but this wasn't being picked up. So we know that it's really important to gain the perspective of young children. Also, we think that this study promoted children's active engagement in research through images and activities that were of interest to them. The educators actually reported to us that the children were very eager and interested to complete the tool, the self-report tool, that it was enjoyable for them, and that even children whose parents did not consent for them to participate in the research still asked if they could complete the tool as well. And we think that the tool can likely be adapted for research in other areas, such as mental health and well-being. So we think that there's a lot of potential to use the design elements of this tool for other areas of interest. And that's all that we've got to share today. Again, I want to thank you for joining today, and please contact me if you want to know more, or if you have any questions. Thank you.